Well, hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be able to connect again, as we often do on most Sundays. Today, my presentation is entitled Knowledge, and the subtitle I've chosen is Dead and Living. And of course, that is from chapter 36 of the Tao of Joy Every Day. And when it comes to knowledge, both dead and alive, I feel like in all honesty, may have more experience with dead knowledge than with living knowledge. But I'll tell you, I'm not enlightened. I don't claim to be. Don't think I probably will make it in this life, and I honestly have spent a lot of time getting it wrong. But I think there's times when I've been fortunate enough with the guidance and help of other people who are far more skilled at cultivating the Tao than I am, that I have glimpses of living knowledge, and boy, I can tell you there's quite a big difference. So I want to start by with my relatively new format of doing a review of day 35, which was day 35, of course, of the Tao of Joy Every Day, and that was on focused intent. And with focused intent, we, together with the clear idea of where to go and the courage to take action, it allows one to experience the great power of the Tao. And, in many ways, today's talk, and I'm sure this is, the reason for this is because Derek's a really good writer, and as he writes his book, you'll see that the themes sort of flow very well. One part of it will flow into the next, and so knowledge and the great power of the Tao is a similar theme that'll appear in today's discussion of day 36. So moving forward with focused intent and taking action towards goals will bring help from all directions, as everyone and everything aligns up in a way that makes destiny come to fruition. And of course, we talked about the key to tapping into the real power of the Tao is to not let ideas get stuck in the head by just thinking about them, but instead to take action toward the direction and vision. And when this is done, the Tao changes circumstances and situations in ways that are frankly unbelievable until the actual experience of it occurs. And then, of course, at the end, as Derek pointed out, acting without expectation combined with focused intent will lead us to the limitless potential that the Tao provides everyone. That really is sort of what spirituality is about. It's about reaching our limitless potential through what we already have, which of course is our true selves, our souls, or that sacred part of us that's there forever, even long after this physical incarnation that we live in the present time and space of this moment fades away. So that was day 35, and of course today's talk, as I said at the beginning, is day 36, knowledge. And obviously I chose books to represent knowledge, even though as we move forward through time, these are kind of becoming a thing of the past in a way. Thankfully, there's still lots of children's books that are still good. I wonder if children's books will ever actually go away, despite the digital world we live in. But books seem like a good pictorial way to communicate the idea of knowledge, and that's why I chose this picture. But in talking about knowledge, in a sense, in thinking about it a little bit, knowledge is power. We've all heard that, and of course it's true. When I think back to the things I've learned in life from books, often there is sort of a power that comes from that. But it's important to distinguish, the true, authentic power of the Tao from the sort of temporal almost, I would say, illusion of power that we often see manifested in the world, largely, in fact, entirely probably because of what human beings do, uh, as we struggle through figuring out life. And let's face it, I think most of us, and maybe even most of the time, especially when you look at it, but there's lots of ways for us to mess up, and we certainly see that. I mean, I certainly see that as I look to the past of my own life and the mistakes that I made. And of course, it's okay to make mistakes. I mean, that's how we learn. But in thinking of the different kinds of knowledge, to me, essentially, there's two types. There's living knowledge and dead knowledge. And if you want knowledge to be true power that has the power to change your life and make it worth living, it's true only if you're cooking with the right kind of knowledge. And that, of course, is living knowledge. There's a big difference between living knowledge and the dead knowledge of books. So living knowledge is quite different from dead knowledge. And in talking about dead knowledge, Derek gives a great example in this chapter. He talks about how people who engage in dead knowledge, what they often do is they'll use a quote from one book to prove the point of, a quote from another book. And I knew exactly what he meant. I know what that is. It's knowledge for the sake of knowledge itself, in a way, and not for anything else. And that, of course, really is dead knowledge. In a way, the way I think of it is that knowledge is really a neutral thing. It's a metaphysical thing. To me, it's not really tangible when you think about it, but it's neutral, and it's very much how you use it that determines whether or not it's going to be living or dead knowledge. If we use it for the point of showing people how smart we are, that's just stroking our egos. And I'll be honest with you, very intelligent people, this is something that can easily sneak up on you. You may have genuine interest in different things, but you have to be really careful, because, as I always say, that the ego is quite sneaky. It sneaks up on your life in a way, and sometimes you don't really know you're doing it. And sometimes it takes years of doing it until you reach the tipping point and realize that, what am I really talking about here? Because dead knowledge, and you can always, as an outsider listening to other people, it's always easy to tell, because it's obvious when someone's using knowledge for the sake of knowledge. And it's obvious when someone's cooking with living knowledge. It's the kind of thing where you know it when you see it. And I think we all know it when we see it. And it's easy to get sucked into dead knowledge, really. But it's important to remember that really is sort of about stroking the ego. And there's no depth to it. And it doesn't lead to clarity. In fact, when you do that, when you engage in dead knowledge, especially when you try to think about dead knowledge deeply, it just leads to confusion and complexity. Whereas living knowledge, true knowledge, which comes really from the experience of putting what you know into practice, that kind of knowledge is quite different, because it comes from actual experience. And it really is like cooking with gas, so to speak, because it's not the sharing of it or the connection of it with others or the experience of using it in a practical, useful way is not about any contrived objective of making yourself look smart or something like that, or to show off. It's done effortlessly because you don't know you're doing it. You're just using what you know to live life to the fullest. And that can be really in any context. It can be in sharing with others. It can be in a task that you like. If you're someone who's into carpentry and you take the knowledge you've learned, which undoubtedly you learned from experience, and you put that to work, you can get great joy from that kind of knowledge. Even to something as simple as one of the things that I'll share with you that I personally love to do is put jigsaw puzzles together. I love to do it, but if you think about it, when you're dealing with large uh, jigsaw puzzles with lots of pieces. On the one hand, you could say, "Boy, that's pretty complex," but there's always sort of a procedure involved that you learn from actually doing it. You always put the edge together first. Then you look for parts in the picture where the colors are the same, and maybe you group colors together next, and then you group shapes of pieces together, and then through the actual action of trial and error, you put together the beautiful picture that you chose in the first place when you were at the store buying the puzzle. and it's and it's funny. I like this example because for me personally, one of the things I love to do, though I don't do it anymore because it's hard to do when you have small children, but it's wonderful to get lost in the activity of puzzling. It's quite enjoyable, and oftentimes it allows you to free your mind and just work on the task at hand. It is a really wonderful thing, and I think that's very akin to putting any knowledge you have, whether it's how to puzzle or how to do anything. If you take that and you put that into the action of actually doing something in the world, and that can be anything from, like I said, carpentry, or putting a puzzle together, or connecting and sharing with others, or just living life anywhere, or being in nature, or living in a city, or it really doesn't matter. But the idea of it is taking what you know and doing something useful with it, as opposed to just learning so you can know, when really, when you think about the things that you sort of tangibly know, if you really think about it in the grand scheme of things, in the end, what use are they? It's kind of like unspent money, right? In the end, we're all going to die. But the real key thing is, how much time do we have to live? Because none of us really know. And so it's very akin to that. And I think that's the point that Derek makes so well in this chapter. And as always, I want to invite you all to actually read the chapter. Every once in a while, I'll read from it, but generally I don't, because I want you to be able to read Derek's words and how well written they are, and how inspiring they are, and how much he taps into the truth in every one of these days of this book. And so the living knowledge of putting what we have learned into useful, practical action is what brings true wisdom and understanding. Dead knowledge, by contrast, is often just about stroking the ego, which is just a construct that we all created at some point. And generally, the ego is about as useful as dead knowledge itself. And that really is true. When you think about what the ego is, I often think about, like, when does it come about? Because, you think about a baby or a very small child, like a toddler, they don't really have an ego yet. And for those of you who've spent time with children of that age, or if you're a parent and you remember when your kids were that age, or maybe you have kids that are that age now, the wonderful thing about that age is watching the authentic acquisition of knowledge and then the application of it without any ulterior motives at all. That's what children do. They're just there is no ego yet that gets in the way, so they're just sponges that absorb everything and then use it. And I think that's what Jesus was talking about when he said, when he talked about being childlike, and how being childlike, it has a lot of wisdom in it. And it's true, because the behavior doesn't spring from anything other than really the authentic power of the Tao, because there's nothing that's flown in the way yet. And then you think about when the ego sort of comes online, and I think it sort of starts sort of somewhere between toddlerhood and school age, and you see that, and I guess obviously there's a biological need for an ego. So I don't want to say that it's all bad. There's a biological need for it. It's connected to survival and getting by in the world, the real world. But at the same time, how much we buy into this construct that's been created, and it really has been created. I mean, it's akin to our names. What do our names really say about who we are? They don't really say much, really. I mean, if you really think about it, for most of us, if not all of us in this meeting, although there can be exceptions, it's just something your parents thought up. It's a designation. But it doesn't say much about who you are or what you do. It's your actions in life that really say who you are, what you do, what you think, your state of being, whether you're drifting or you actually have a direction, and that you control your destiny by guiding the rudders that are offered to you to put you on your way. I mean, that's what really says who you are. And that's really what knowledge is about. It's putting what you know into action, not for the reason of appearing smart, but to actually create something with your life through what you know. And I think that's ultimately what we're really here for, is to do something, whatever we choose to do, whatever purpose we want in life. Certainly bringing it to fruition, knowledge is a part of that. When I think of, the people I know in my life who shared their knowledge with others, and how you can tell it's authentic. And when the people that I think of, the ones that foremost come to mind for me are Bill and Derek and Carmen, because every week, well, not every week, but most Sundays, that they share what they know with others. And I'm sure many of the people in this meeting remember Carmen's presentations and how wonderful they were, and how knowledgeable a person she was on a wide range of subjects. But you could tell it wasn't dead knowledge, because she brought it to life with what she put together to share with all of us. And of course, it's the same thing with Bill, and it's the same thing with Derek, with everything that he creates in his books and in these meetings and in going over the Tao Te Ching. And of course, all the wonderful presentations that Bill gives. And, that's an example of, like I said, living knowledge when you see it. And those are examples that I think of. And the other example that came to mind from my past is, I remember in high school, we had a guest speaker, and he had a rather tragic story. He had he'd become an alcoholic, basically, and he was also a motorcycle rider, and he had too much to drink, and he was riding with his girlfriend, and someone turned in front of him, and there was he got into a terrible accident, and he was seriously wounded, and his girlfriend passed away. And I remember he spoke at our high school, and he shared the knowledge of that experience with us. And I don't know if it touched my other classmates as much as it touched me, but it certainly touched me. Together with that, with the living knowledge that my mother shared with me. I mean, she always told me, hey, look, you have a history of alcoholism in the family, and you're half Irish, so you need to be careful like I was careful. I mean, that's the kind of knowledge and wisdom that you share with the people you connect with. And it is living knowledge. It's authentic. And that's the explanation or the example from my past. I think of, what that gentleman shared with us, and how useful it was to all of us, and how he took the pain, the knowledge of the pain and the experience of what he went through, and shared it with others. And he certainly touched me. I mean, I remember it all these years later. And then the other great example I think of in my present life of living knowledge is my son, Christopher. Because in a way, it's sort of like his childhood is extended a bit, because he has a disability. And, if I were to compare Ellie, my daughter, who I love dearly, and who's a typical child, and, very smart and very knowledgeable and a quick learner and all that. But then I look at my son, Christopher, and it's like he was born with living knowledge, and it just exudes from him. And he doesn't really have a lot of book knowledge. And given the situation, he may not ever have that much of it. And that's okay, because I look at him, and what he knows really only what matters. When I think about it, he knows how people feel. He knows how to take life in the moment. Sometimes people with disabilities, especially when they're born with them, are just amazing examples of how to just be. And for me, he's an example of someone who takes knowledge and uses it in a way to make life better and wonderful. So we can tap into the authentic power of the Tao, but by using our knowledge to gain clarity and understanding. And that comes from the experience of putting knowledge to use through unattached actions and connection with our fellow human beings as we navigate the path of life. I mean, that really is the difference between someone who shares knowledge because they want to appear knowledgeable and someone who shares knowledge because they want to use it to live life and make life better, no matter what that involves, whether it's carpentry or whatever your career is, or your connections with your friends, or your connections with your families, or your connections with strangers even. That knowledge is good knowledge. And that's the knowledge that leads to the power that's worth having, the power of your own life to make your own life better. And in doing so, you make the lives of those around you better as well. And as always, I mean, the power to affect the external world is always depends on how you affect your own internal world and how that and what you do in that internal environment to manifest in the external environment. That's really the only way that we can shape the world is through working on ourselves. And by learning everything there is to learn. There's nothing wrong with learning. But by no means, I feel confident speaking for Derek because I'm sure he meant this. It's not that knowledge is bad. Knowledge is a good thing. It's how we use it. It's one of those things where it's the singer more than the song. That's what the difference between living knowledge and dead knowledge. And again, I want to invite all of you to read that actually from Derek's words because it's a short chapter. I mean, in a couple of paragraphs, maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs, he really summarizes it with such depth and understanding and clarity. So I'm going to start to sum it up now. So knowledge is power. We've all heard that. But there is a difference between living and dead knowledge, just as there's a difference between the authentic power of the Tao that comes from the experience of putting knowledge to good use through action and the unauthentic illusion of power that drives much of what we often see humans do. Yeah, I mean, there's real power in a temporal sense, I guess, but it's not enduring. It's fleeting. That kind of power isn't going to last forever. It ends when you die. Whereas the power that comes from living knowledge, you're tapping into the eternal power that's always been there, that is always available to us while we're alive, and that will be available to us after, when we're done, or when we move on to the next life, if that's what it is. That's the real difference between living power and dead power. And pursuing dead knowledge leads to complexity and confusion. The more you acquire knowledge just for the sake of acquiring knowledge, you realize that it really does. You realize how complex it is and confusing you'll make yourself. But when you acquire knowledge more for what you can do with it and how you can make your life better and the lives of other people better, well, then it's quite different. Then you gain clarity and understanding, and there's worlds of difference between the two, and it's easy to see. I think we all recognize it when we see it. So sharing dead knowledge is a way of stroking our egos, really, which also offers no help with actual spiritual growth. True growth happens from the wisdom that comes from putting knowledge into useful, unattached action, to doing with something with the things we've learned in life. And it doesn't matter if those things are learned from books or from experience or from anything. It's what you, regardless of how you acquire the knowledge, it's what you do with it that makes the difference, that makes the determination to whether it's going to be living knowledge or dead knowledge. So living knowledge offers clarity and true understanding, the understanding that comes from taking our knowledge and putting it into action. This is a practical, useful knowledge that can be used to create effortless joy and happiness. Living knowledge is akin to the joy we experience when we are close to nature and the happiness of sharing moments of connection with our fellow human beings. And that's the kind of knowledge worth learning about and worth holding to and worth sharing. And so, as always, I want to start to wrap things up. And first, with an invitation. If you've learned from the Tao of Joy every day, perhaps you'll want to share what you've learned with others by presenting on one of the 365 days in the book. Or if you've just learned anything about the Tao, it doesn't even have to be in the context of a chapter in the book, but just anything that you've learned that you might be able to share with others. I know many people in this meeting are far more advanced in cultivating the Tao than I am, and certainly I encourage you to share those Tao insights, what you've learned with others, as it will deepen not only their understanding, but your own as well. And so, as always, I'll end with a book recommendation, The Tao of Joy Every Day, a great book to use daily to help one study and learn the Tao teachings and put them into action. So there it was, day 36, Knowledge, Dead and Living. Thank you all for listening to what I had to say today. I hope I said something that was of use, and I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday.
Thank you, Alex. May I request your wonderful summary up on the screen again?
Oh, certainly. There we go.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts as they come to mind. When Alex talked about sharing the Tao, I want to just emphasize to everyone that sharing the Tao has one magical effect, and that is it brings people closer together. So that being the case, sharing the Tao is great for relationships. When you talk about the Tao, you reveal a deep part of yourself to someone that you trust, to a friend, to someone that you feel may benefit from the teachings just as you have. So I want to challenge everyone to find something in the Tao to share with a loved one. I think that it's one of the most meaningful things that you can do, especially in the holiday season, the season where we're all in touch with family and closeness and building relationships. The other thought is that without a doubt, the Tao is about practical, down-to-earth, usable suggestions and discussions and actions. So later on, when I get into my presentation, that's going to be my focus as well. Specifically, after we have talked about the meaning of the different lines from last time, today it's important for us to dig into some of the crucial questions in life. As we go about life, and I know that sooner or later, someone is going to come along and criticize. So we've all seen it, we've all experienced it. Some of us handle it more gracefully than others, probably not me, but that's a common experience for all of humanity. So a very practical, down-to-earth, usable discussion would be, well, how do I handle criticism? So that's coming up. Before we get there, let me also chime in on what Alex said about dead knowledge. So when I think about dead knowledge, I oftentimes think about outdated knowledge. So knowledge can quickly become outdated, especially nowadays. Think about the progress that we have seen in technology. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when Bitcoins did not exist. Suddenly we're talking about it. And wasn't that long ago when, not everybody had a cell phone. Now everybody does. Practically everybody does. So the world, the technology is moving in a lightning pace. And I want to use Alex as sort of a personal confessional and just say that once upon a time, I too hoarded dead knowledge that became outdated. So the example that I have in mind is that there used to be multiple boxes that I had in storage. Most often I had it in my study. Sometimes I had it in my garage. These boxes were really heavy and they contained magazines. Yes, I had a huge collection of computer magazines, and now I realize that nothing in the world get outdated quite as quickly as those computer magazines. So just to give you an idea, I have massive collections of multiple magazines. I had PC World, I have Mac World magazine, I have PC Magazine, I have Maximum PC, Computer Shopper, especially Computer Shopper. It's really thick, full of advertising, and I just loved it. So I held on to all of them. I kept them in like new, mint condition. And, I thought of them as a resource that I had. Like, how cool is it? I can go back and refer to them whenever I want. And years passed, I realized that I've never actually once gone back to my storage of magazines to refer to any back issues of any of the magazines that I had collected. So they were literally sitting around doing nothing. They were dead weights. So when I had a chance to make myself go back to them and leaf through the pages to see what was in it, I was pretty much astonished to discover all these things that are no longer in use. Just the software used by those ancient computers featured in those magazines. I mean, my own computing history goes back to the days of MS-DOS, IBM DOS, Windows 3.1, Windows 95, Windows 2000, Windows NT, Windows XP, wow, Windows Vista, all these operating systems that nobody uses anymore, practically nobody. So those were the featured operating systems in these magazines, and they were full of tips and tricks and strategies with glossy full color pictures to show you what to do, referring to software that nobody will probably ever touch again. And because they were so glossy and colorful, it really was like the 5 colors blinding the eyes. I was blinded. I was spiritually blinded to hold on to them. When I moved, I carried these heavy boxes with me from one place to another without giving it a second thought. Well, practicing the Tao, cultivating Tao, learning about the Tao finally had the effect of waking me up. I finally realized that these are truly dead weight and I would be better off without them. So the day came when I took these boxes and discarded them. So to a small extent, I have liberated myself, although I know that I still have a long way to go, with many other things to get rid of as well. But at least it's a start. Begin by discarding dead knowledge.